Honorable Tharaka Balasuriya, welcome to Country in Focus program. Now you are also one of the young MPs who are in the current parliament. We see now a lot of young MPs entering the parliament and also making some good contribution, but people don't know much about them. So you come from a political family, but you're also a professional. Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, your family, your profession, etc.
Well, thank you for having me, Nalaka. First of all, I don't know whether I agree on your assessment. I'm a young MP, but I think I'm a new MP. As you mentioned that I do come from a political family, but I think I made my entry into politics in 2012. That too after firm affirmation from my father that he will be retiring from politics. But prior to that, I was in the corporate sector. I started my corporate sector in the finance, in investment banking. I worked for about 5 years for banking for a bank, and thereafter I switched to insurance. I worked for a private insurance company initially, and then thereafter I moved to Sri Lanka Insurance. Then, of course, it was during the period I was working that the Sri Lanka Insurance it was reverted back to government by court order. So I had the fortune of experiencing how a large company operates under private sector and also under the government sector. Then in 2012, with the provincial council elections coming up in 2012, I resigned my post, and then I first entered politics in 2012, contesting the Sabaragamuwa provincial council elections.
Now, as far as your constituency is concerned, which is Kegol, what are the problems that you see currently, main issues that the people are facing, and how do you think a government, at least a future government, should address these issues?
I think Kegol is one of those districts which is largely based on agriculture, largely based on rubber and tea. And I think if you look at times like this, particularly during the rainy seasons, people get hit in two ways. One thing is, the rains prevent them from tapping any rubber or tea, and then they can't find any manual labor, and then in the cost of living also, especially the things such as vegetable prices move up due to the effects of rain. So people get hit because their expenses go up and then their income drops. I think we need to have a master plan for Kegol, of course, and that master plan should be drawn up in thinking with the thinking of the Northern Expressway, where along the Northern Expressway we will develop clusters. At the moment, the only industrial cluster we have is the industrial park in Tulkiriya. But we need to have more industrial clusters in Kegol. Also, we need to make sure that like we develop tourism pertaining to Kegol. The two areas which their sort of potential is Pinnavala and Kitulgala. We know that Pinnavala is one of the most visited areas in Sri Lanka, but unfortunately the tourists over there they don't stay overnight. They have Coca-Cola, have some French fries, and then they head into Dambulla or they head into Kandy. So we need to develop activities around Pinnavala, focus on Pinnavala, so we make sure that at least 10 to 20% of the tourists visiting Pinnavala will stay overnight. Similarly, Kitulgala, we need to brand it in a different manner, perhaps get the corporates to engage over there in activities. especially things such as training activities. And also, in addition to that, I think if you look at Kegol, Kegol is a beautiful area. It's very greeny, perfect for universities. We have started with the Sanasa University. I think maybe we can create university towns in areas like Kegol. Then another way which we can develop is Kegol is bringing small industries to the villages. If you look at the number of people in the poverty line, it's quite high in Kegol. So we need to immediately make sure that we teach them a skill, maybe a vocational skill, so that their incomes, the incomes actually we can double or quadruple in the short term. Someone who makes a lot of money, to double his or quadruple his income is a bit difficult. But if someone close to the poverty line, we should really have a program where the skill development takes place, and small industries are supported through, let's say, interest subsidies, things such as that. So I think it has to be a comprehensive development package, taking into notion the people's wants. We always talk about, we want a country like Singapore, we want a 8%, 10% growth, but I think living in a place like Kegol, the people in areas like Kegol, they also essentially don't want to leave their villages. So they would want to work close by to their villages, where maybe in an hour's time or maybe hour and a half's time they can commute from the place of work. So with the process which was started by the last government, especially with the highways coming in, as the Honorable Lakshman Kiriyalla says, I think he's sadly mistaken if he thinks that the purpose of the expressway is only for the people to go and worship the Dalada Maligawa.
You were one of the earliest MPs who thought that this system is not going to work and went and joined the so-called joint opposition. In a way, you made a lot of sacrifices also in doing so. What made you leave the government, or rather not join the government, and join the JO? What have you achieved through that?
Very good question, Nalaka. I think looking back, from the beginning itself, it was quite clear this was a huge manipulation which is taking place, and it was full of contradictions. Now let's look at the case of the current president Maithripala Sirisena taking the chairmanship of SLFP. Here's a person who has contested from a different party, trying to lead the people who have opposed him. So it in itself is a contradiction. So it became more and more clear when we actually when we said that we wanted to stay in the opposition. The president told us that, okay, you can stay in the opposition, but you can't get the lead of the opposition post. So we knew there was a script which according to which that all the actors has to play, and part of that script was to give the lead of the opposition post to the Tamil parties. So then you can show at least to the international community that we have reached this concession between the two major parties and also the Tamil parties, and it became more and more clear that the people who oppose this view are going to be sidelined. So in that regard, it was quite an easy decision for I think for me to take in joining the joint opposition. And in answering the second part of your question, although I remember that at one time I was sent by the Honorable Speaker for a seminar in India, and then they have one of these cards which with your name and your designation. So they say MP, and then they said government. I said, no, I'm not a MP from government. I'm an MP from the opposition. And the members of and the officials from the parliament would argue with me, saying that no, you're officially a member from the government. So it goes to show the contradictions here. I'm an MP who has voted against the government from the budget to most of the controversial bills which they passed. But now when I go to an international conference, then I don't have a choice in saying whether I'm a member from the opposition or from the member from the government. But I think we have given credibility to a legitimate opposition, and we have made the public aware that the so-called Yahapalana government is moving according to a script pre-written by various parties. And I think it is reflected in the constitutional reforms which they are trying to embark on. So we have been able to make the country aware of in terms of the now, let's say, most of the time what gets highlighted is what you have achieved. You don't get highlighted what you have not achieved. Now, for example, we were the Sri Lanka Podjana Perumuna. We were able to have a unprecedented victory. Now, due to that victory, we were able to somewhat, let's say, I wouldn't say completely eliminate, but at least put on check or postpone the constitutional reforms, or put it on back foot. Now, that what we prevented wouldn't get highlighted.
Right now, we see certain confusions in the political situation where some SLP members, 16 of them, trying to join the SLPP, there is some resistance coming. Is it something that coming from the MPs, or is it something that is coming from the grassroots levels? What is your view on this?
I don't know whether resistance is actually the correct word. There's a Russian proverb which says that trust but verify. And similarly, it's a this is a situation where 16 MPs wants to join, and as you very correctly said, I think the objective this time, all the MPs are unisomy in their thought regarding that we need to break the government's 2/3 majority. There's no disagreement or there's no argument pertaining to that. But how we operate with the 16 MPs is where there is is discussion and where there is difference in opinion. Because one thing is that there are still members of the SLFP, and some are advocating the President Maithripala Sirisena be the presidential candidate for the next election. So there is, I think, with the recent history, some MPs are a bit suspicious, I think, and it's not without cause. I don't want to mention names, but there are certain MPs who said that Mahinda Rajapaksa will be jailed. A few years, maybe 2 years back, there are MPs who said Mahinda Rajapaksa will be jailed. So when you have to deal with certain people, again, it's better to be cautious. And I know the large majority of the 16 MPs are ones which we can definitely work for a common agenda. But let's take one step at a time. We had a meeting at parliamentary in our group meeting. We decided we'll consult them on a case-by-case issue. There's no harm in consulting them and building a broad coalition. That should be the end objective. But just because now most of the MPs pointed out that there's also practical difficulties. You can't have two group meetings. The 16 MPs come in a meeting, in our group meeting, and then they can't be participating in the SLFP group meeting. You can't have two leaders. You can't be, when Mahinda Rajapaksa is there, he can't be your leader, and then you can't have Maithripala Sirisena as your leader. So there's some fundamental issues. First, the 16 MPs also has to clarify. People felt betrayed. People felt that that they had cast a preference for the MPs who got selected to Parliament in order to act in a certain manner, and whether their conduct is endorsed by the MPs will be seen in future elections.
Now, in a democratic country, Tharaka, whatever the verdict that the people give, you have to respect that. So whatever the reason, you have to admit the fact that your party or your president lost the previous election as well as the general election. Now, there would have been reasons that the majority had to give you that result. Now, in a future government that you are aspiring to establish, how do you make sure that this, whatever the problems are resolved, and a future government will fulfill the people's expectations the right way? What can you as a MP and your group can do to ensure that?
Another very good question, Nalaka. Of course, first of all, we need to do a self-assessment of where we went wrong. If we come to power and if we repeat the same mistakes which we made during 2010 to 2015 period, we will again be voted out of power. And we also need to assess which direction we want to move in. Let's say, for example, in 2009, the political situation soon after war has changed dramatically. Now, let's say in 2020, it would have taken about 11 years. So in 10 years, after the country has progressed, the needs of the people change. So things such as, I think one of the, actually the joint opposition didn't oppose, one of the good bills which I would say this government introduced is the Right to Information Act. So good bills, things such as good bills which this government introduced, we need to continue. Now, when we talk about the elements of good governance, we need to look at them and see whether these are beneficial. And of course, media freedom, if you look at women's rights, if you look at the freedom of press and other things, in a civil society, it's an accepted phenomena that these are necessary and these are beneficial. Now, what this government is doing and what is beneficial can be two different things. People can also, international organizations can also use good governance as a means of interfering in a different country. America's biggest export in the 20th century, it has been argued by certain historians, is democracy. America tries to export its brand of democracy, and in effect it's neo-imperialism through these organizations. It's not about improving the press freedoms. It's not about improving women's rights. It's not about improving or empowering the citizens, but it's about continuation of a certain agenda. So we need to differentiate. We need to differentiate between this and the ulterior factors, what some people say. But just because it's been advocated by the United States that we need press freedom, for example, that shouldn't be the basis in what we need to follow press freedom. We need to follow press freedom because it's a good thing. Internationally, empirically, we have found that countries with more press freedom, there's more development, there's less corruption, I think the Transparency International recently, when they came out with an article pertaining to the correlation between press freedom and corruption. So there's a strong correlation between the two, and strong correlation between countries which have adopted good governance and the development, and not only just the development of that country, but also how that development, whether it's all-inclusive development or it's development of just a few.
Now, it's a known fact during the war, the former president had to take some hard decisions, which in a way upset some Western powers because he had to take decisions against their wishes. Going forward, given the geopolitical importance of Sri Lanka, how do you think our foreign relations should be managed by a future government? What kind of approach we should take vis-a-vis China, India, USA and the other powers?
Going forward, Nalaka, I don't think we can have a constant foreign policy in an environment of dynamism where the actors are changing very rapidly in Asia. I think it should be Asia-centric. We need to adopt a foreign policy of a small state foreign policy surrounded by a big country. 60% of the United States armed forces now, which are deployed overseas, are in Asia. Early it was in Europe, and we know that China, they are rapidly trying to, through the One Belt initiative, they're trying to ensure that the future resources to China will be protected. But there's economic gain in that, and China's position in the global rankings. There will be more and more interference by the United States. What's happening with the Donald Trump administration, I think it's a temporary thing. They will probably move out to a certain degree, but their foreign policy will continue. I mean, good example is they moved out of the Human Rights Council, but they're still saying that you need to adopt the resolution which you signed. So I don't think that, although Trump will try to have an isolation policy, the U.S. State Department really works that way. So for one thing, that we need to work closely with India and United States also. Don't forget that it was the United States who provided us with the intelligence that towards the end of the war, which we were able to, our ships were able to go and destroy these LTT ships. One thing is that although maybe China will economically, perhaps within the next 20 years or so, dominate by 2050 they will become maybe a global superpower in terms of the economy. US by far will remain the biggest power in the world, I think, for a lot more, maybe next whole century. Why I'm saying that is that if you look at the military spending, China's is nowhere close to the United States. The top 30 countries, the next 30 countries, if you add their military budgets, it's less than that of the United States. So that's how much they spend on the military. That's how, and equal amounts they spend on other ways and means of influencing countries through, as I said, exportation of democracy, for example. And also we need to align ourselves with some of the smaller nations in Asia and Africa. Now the UN Human Rights Council, United States is leaving the UN Human Rights Council, stating that the Middle Eastern and the African bloc has taken a political view towards Israel. Then if that's the case, there are numbers. Now there's no major power which is twisting the arms of the smaller nations, saying that you need to vote one way. That's actually what happened. Initially the smaller nations were supporting us, but then US started twisting the arms of these the small nations saying that vote with us. So now I believe there's room for us to make friendly ties with this nation. President has already has stated that we will not have foreign judges in abuses against the constitution, and the Tamil parties also have agreed to that. But in one manner to circumvent the situation, they are coming up with other the extradition treaty and the Office of Missing Persons and the Convention of Missing Persons and Torture, these international treaties, which will to a certain degree limit our capability to maneuver even if a new government comes. So it will be within the next 1.5 years is a critical period in our foreign relations. It gives time for us to negotiate with the smaller nations. We need to have good relationship with India. It was, I think, President Mahinda Rajapaksa who told me that Nirupama Rao, I think the Foreign Secretary, has told the former His Excellency that India is like a teenage girl. So a teenage girl in love. India will adore you, will take care of you, but also India is very jealous. If you look at somebody else, then it's very jealous and will get angry. So how do you constrain yourself with this teenage girl is the question. But I think it can be done. I think we need to separate the economic focus and the political focus. Of course, economically we need to be Asia-centric, but politically we need to engage with the West and also the East, ensuring that India's security is not threatened. So the jealous girlfriend will not remain jealous.
Thank you very much for coming for this program. It was a pleasure discussing all these things with our future administrators and finding out and sharing with the people what you think of the country and the way country should be run. Thank you.
Thank you very much.